Hi, this is Ed Hoffman, President and founder of Competitive Business Solutions. I wanted to introduce the third segment of our interview with Kim Ernzen, the COO of StandardAero. In this segment, Kim brings all these concepts together and talks about leading transformations, the importance of data-driven decision making, what sort of red flags she looks for when she comes into a business, and what she learned from her previous roles. Finally, she talks about her thoughts about the aerospace industry and the direction that she sees it going. I hope you enjoy this segment, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you. There was a sensei I worked with many years ago who was teaching me, and hopefully that continues because I think learning is a forever endeavor. And he said something along the lines of there was a pretty significant defect that we found on the line, and his comment was, "This is a great day because if you find the defect, you can resolve it. You can get to the root cause and you can resolve it." And often, at least the way I was originally trained coming up through my early corporate life, it was, this is bad. We found a defect. As you said, filter, kind of cage what you can escalate up, kind of not bother people. And it was just a different way of thinking about it, where defects that come through, not that it's celebrated, good day being celebrated per se, but it's a good day in that we are fixing things, that we are putting them to
Exactly.
bed, that they won't happen again.
Right.
Um, so joining StandardAero, big change. You were with
Yes,
Raytheon for quite some time,
I was.
and there, as you kind of started talking about, there's a culture, and you stepped into a new company, new culture that both is building and growing. StandardAero is an amazing company in its growth, an amazing company
Mhm.
in what it's able to do in the marketplace. It does maintenance, repair, and operations in the aircraft business, but they also do acquisition. And so they've done
We
quite a
do.
bit of growth through acquisition. And each acquisition has kind of its own sort of culture.
Mhm.
It's coming from a different company.
It does.
Um, Maybe you could share a little bit around how you try to understand that, and maybe is having a standard aero culture important rather than individual cultures? And if so, how do you try to pull that together?
Yeah, no, that's a great segue because we're actually on a journey right now to, and we in fact we just recently launched it, kind of rebranding our Standard Aero operating system. And what we mean by that is, to your point, we've been phenomenally successful in going after very strategic acquisitions, really looking at where can we add capability, particularly in our component repair space, which is part and parcel to engine repair, right? As these engines start to get a little longer in the tooth, obviously, you want to have affordable ways to keep the life cycle going out further. And so the more we can continue to develop, good, solid repairs, that really helps the operators keep their life cycle costs in check. And so we continually are out looking at, where's their added capability and or capacity that makes sense to add into the StandardAero um, organization. But to your point, that has evolved us into having multiple ERP systems, multiple languages that we use as you go from engine shop to engine shop or component repair to component repair. And so we recently just spent a lot of time really talking about, okay, how do we continually transform and evolve to having the best operating system so that when you really talk about at the 50,000 foot level, the service we provide is, we get the most important asset off of an aircraft because without it, you're not going anywhere. To turning it around because turnaround time, TAT in the industry is king and, doing that in the most efficient and effective manner. And so we had just spent 4 months with like our top 5, sites from a capacity platform level and really honed in on, okay, how do we start to standardize all of this? And set aside, what the ERP system may be, because the ERP system is just one mechanism. We need to find the processes and again, the language we use that everybody is cycle 1, cycle 2, the same inputs and outputs occur in each of those. So I'm really excited because one, there's a hunger in the organization to have that standardization, knowing that I bet the site over here is probably doing something way better than the way I'm doing it because we've kind of grown up figuring it out on our own at each of these individual sites. So we just recently launched off into phase 2. And what's really exciting is I'm watching the VPGMs that have been involved now calling each other, right? Their network has expanded, going, oh, wait, I saw that you were doing this, and I want to go ahead and just start to implement it ahead of when we have the final solution. And so they're already starting to tap into
Yeah,
that, which
that's
is
really cool. So you're using StandardAero operating system as a way of, I think if I describe unifying the company and
yes.
bringing it together so that there's that common language, common approach, ability to share lessons learned. Oh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
How would you measure from your seat? So you're an executive within StandardAero. What would you use as sort of a measurement of success? What are sort of your milestones or benchmarks as you moving forward to know whether, hey, we're hitting what the expectation is, maybe we're a little below, or we're accelerating faster? What are the things that you look at from your executive chair?
Yeah. So we're going to be focused in on, are we seeing improvement in our turnaround times, and making sure that, I mean, that's kind of the big mark.
And
That's what our
what's turnaround time?
turnaround time is when we receive the engine, that starts the clock. And so we receive it. We have to do an inspection to make sure we understand what exactly the work scope is going to be on the engine. So keep in mind, there's different, again, depending on the hours on the engine. Some are just coming in to do a bore scope and a light work scope. Others, again, depending on, what stage the engine is in, may have a full tear down, and then you have to haul parts. So again, every work scope is slightly different. So you have to get in, you have to, do the full inspection to understand that, align with the customer on what
I
they
was
want
gonna
to have.
say, so that's touching everything. That's touching
Correct.
customer, engineering, procurement, that you got the right material,
Yes.
that, in this industry, they use something called rotables,
Yep.
potentially. So the right material is available, it's been ready to go.
Exactly.
Manufacturing. Wow, that's tremendous.
Yeah, and then there's life limited parts, so LLPs that, have a certain life that you have to work directly back with the OEM. So yes, you get to work with the customers, the supply base, the OEM partners, and there's a lot of dynamics going on. So then once you get that engine in, you do the inspection, then you have to start that procurement process, because we typically, keep what we know are known replacement factors, again, depending on what engines. But that becomes a long train, depending on the health of the supply base. And then we get everything back in, we have to reassemble. And then, of course, you have to go through test. And so that's one of the other big pieces to our business is we have these very elaborate test cells that are, OEM partners, because one of the things we pride ourselves on is being very OEM aligned. It's critical to, we're an extension of their brand, and we need to make sure that we can represent them. So our test cells have to be calibrated and correlated with the OEM so that we can support. And we do over 40 different engine types in this business. So a lot of different parts and products. But back to your question. So the TAT is we receive it on day 1, and when we ship it back to the customer is day X.
And why is turnaround so important? What does that mean to the business, to
Well,
StandardAero, and to you?
Well, for StandardAero, I mean, that's how we get paid to do our business. And so when we receive it in, we get to apply labor, which is, why we're in business, and we get to service the engines. And then there's material. And then obviously we get cash once we deliver those engines back out. But why turnaround time is so critical is it's, depending on how long those engines sit here, it can be a challenge on our trade working capital, because if we're putting in all the material and then we to, the last day and we're waiting on, the last part, depending on if that part is taking a while, that puts a lot of strain on our trade working capital. So that's why that turnaround time is so critical. And because for our customers, obviously large fleets will have spare engines that they use. But in the business aviation industry, our customers don't have spare engine. Now we will provide sometimes leased engines. But again, it's it's that top asset on their plane. And so they need to get it back so they can generate their revenue and they can, have their asset that they want and need.
I mean, I love that because um, I going back to my early learnings and senseis who taught me things over time, teachers. One was you can't cheat on a couple things. You can't fool a couple things around continuous improvement and business performance. And one is that turnaround time or lead time, the time it takes to get from an order to a delivery. You can play around with earning standards, efficiency factors, productivity,
Yeah,
all those things can be manipulated, but a start date and a delivery date, it's really hard. And the second
exactly.
one was inventory. So,
Yes.
a lot of people will say, "Hey, look at my factory, look how smooth it's running." And then the first question they would ask is, "Take me to your warehouse," because the warehouse doesn't lie. It's like it's like, somebody's blood pressure. It's like,
Right.
"Okay, I'm really working out." And you're at rest and you're like 140 over 100, we got a problem, you know? Houston, we got a problem. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, those two measures are just you just can't really fake it out. Um, anything from just kind of talking about um, what's important, what you look for, both financially. You're addressing the organization, which is great, and you're
Right.
using the production system as a way of kind of pulling it together. Is as you're starting to add people in, is there a process or method that you're using to try to kind of bring them into this culture yet, or is
Sure.
that something you're still working on?
Working on in some regard, but one of the things since you brought up inventory, I'll get to it here in just a second. But I talked about the StandardAero operating system, which is to me kind of the foundational element. But one of the other things that we're bringing in which, as you know, Ed, you and your team are helping us with, is a classic tool called SIOP, Sales Inventory Operating Planning. We have had pieces of it, kind of loosely running here to your point. That's one of those, what I call the tools in the quiver that's gonna help us with, again, a consistent methodology, a consistent cadence in which we can then use, the data, both the demand signal as well as the help of the inventory and the supply base to better plan our business. And so, I recently just brought in two VPs, one of our global operations, one of supply chain, who both have experience in large organizations that understand how to effectively execute and leverage a SIOP process. And that's one of the things, again, on this journey, we've got pockets of excellence all around this organization. We haven't necessarily thought at an enterprise level always. And so elevating the way we think about, we can't lose focus on our day-to-day tactical, but because we are such a large organization, certain decisions have a different impact, and particularly financially. And if our balance sheet is being used where we've got so much tied up in inventory, that puts constraints on us from being able to invest in, more interesting things like capacity expansion, like being inquisitive out for potential acquisitions. And so starting to get that equation balanced a little better is something that we're focused on. And so, when I'm looking at potentially adding talent to the organization, it is looking at, where can we start to supplement? Not to say we don't have amazing talent here, because we do, but how do we start bringing folks who have, already kind of that muscle memory in some of these areas to help us as we continue this transformation.
Oh, that's great. I what I'd like to do is just finish up with a couple of questions, really open ended. Really could talk about whatever direction you want to take this. One is thinking about sort of your career and if you could go back and if you could go back in time and give yourself
Sure.
some advice, if you were sitting across the desk for someone like yourself and you were going to give some advice. So, what advice would you give to your younger self as you were starting your leadership journey?
Yeah. There's two pieces. First and foremost, I would, because I still challenge everybody today, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is get yourself out of that comfort zone. Put yourself one or two swim lanes over. because that is when you are going to grow exponentially fast. It's just like, if you're exercising, if you're doing the same exercise every day and wondering why you're not seeing different results, it's because that muscle memory's there, right? And so the only time you're going to continue to grow and, yes, there'll be a little pain at first, is to get uncomfortable. And I always, I wish I would have gotten uncomfortable even sooner in my career because, again, that's where you really learn. The second thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. As you're coming up in an organization, right? You always have this feeling like I have to prove it all by myself, right? I have to prove that I'm the smartest or, I solved this and did all these things. At the end of the day, this is why you have a team of people around you. And I wish there was a couple of times, one in particular where I got put into a role and, I absolutely was going to just set the course and I charged ahead and about 6 weeks in realized that I had completely left the team 10 miles behind and had to back up. And so, making sure when you first get in, ask questions, be inquisitive, and don't be afraid to ask for help. People want to see you be successful. So those would be the two pieces of advice.
That's fantastic. And maybe with your experience that you have, 30 years, multiple companies, multiple roles, w- and you've been in aerospace. You're one of those folks that we would
Ah,
consider a lifelong aerospace individual. I was for most part, but now now I branch out a little bit outside. But it gives you really a unique perspective. Where do you see the aerospace industry going in the United States and maybe internationally?
yeah,
And what's sort of your are you optimistic? Do you have any concerns? Where do you see things going?
sure. We know that we always say the aerospace and defense industry is the largest, smallest industry in the world. And what I mean by that is you do it. I have had the fortune of being in a couple of different businesses, and invariably you run into people that you knew, 20 years ago, and it's like you never didn't work together. I had my chance to go to NBAA this last fall for the first time in literally 20 years, and I ran into so many people. It was like old home week. And so that's one of the things that is just phenomenal about this industry, no matter what, company you are representing at the time, has one thing in common, and it's they love this industry. And there is a passion about this industry. And it is a global industry, right? We all rely on technology that's being developed. And so, technology is at the forefront of this industry, always has been. I mean, many things that we all, take for granted in our daily life stemmed from innovation in the aerospace industry. Where I see the biggest change coming is honestly the use of AI. And how do we use it? This industry is full of data because it is such a regulated industry. Because what we do is, responsible for the health and welfare of people that are getting on these planes every day, or using the products that are delivered. There is so much testing that goes on along all different steps of the value stream that it is target rich for AI. Like, how do we use that to help ourselves get better, optimize our processes, make again our ability to deliver our products that much more efficient? And I know, here at StandardAero, we're starting to dip our toe in that space. That I think that's where, all of this industry is trying to figure out how do we really use this, the positive attributes of AI, to really help us be, a better industry for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. A lot of our clients in aerospace and defense, same challenge.
Yeah,
They're all experimenting with AI, looking at ways to leverage it, doing it in a safe way. Because
right,
the concern, of course, is Chat GPT or those things. That's public domain. So how do you
right.
bring it in
Exactly.
and it's we're it feels like we're just at the very beginning, like not even scratching the surface yet as to where this
Exactly.
could go, which is really exciting.
It is, and when you think about the next generation of talent that's coming into your organizations, they have grown up with technology at their fingertips, and so, when they come in to take on these jobs in our facilities, they're expecting to see technology, right, at their fingertips, and they're like, "Wait, what? You want me to go look at a 500-page manual?" Like, and so And so we've got to figure out, okay, how do we blend this, back to your point, in a safe, effective way? But it's definitely is a challenge for all of us in the industry.
Yeah, the kind of the comparable thing for me when I was coming up through and I started using Excel and started doing things like pivot tables and all that, which we thought was like miraculous, right?
Oh,
And they're
yeah.
going to be saying, that whole activity is just going to be, hey, I want to group column A by column B and some C and put it in a table that I can read, and the software, the AI will just do that. So
Exactly.
it's going to be really like you can't even explain it. It's just going to be so different for that
It is.
workforce and a more enjoyable to do. Not that doing pivot
Exactly.
tables isn't fun, but
Right.
there's probably more enjoyable things to be doing at work, kind of using the brain.
Exactly.
Um, well, Ken, is there, what I'd like to do is just kind of wrap up by thanking you for taking the time. You're
Oh, no, thank you.
at the level you're at and what you're doing, being able to carve out some time and share your thoughts is fantastic. I'm very grateful. Folks who watch us are going to learn a lot and grateful as well. Look forward to seeing your career and
So
what you
I feel
continue to do and the journey that you're on. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close down?
No, just again, thank you for reaching out. It has been, again, a privilege and an honor to have our careers intersect multiple times and continue to leverage you and your company. You've always been just a great advocate and champion for, making sure that business continues to go forward. And I've always very much valued even being able to pick up the phone and just bounce something off of you. So thank you very much. And I know. I always say we got the electronic leashes on at all times. But no, I mean, if anyone's interested in joining StandardAero family, we'd love to have you. This is a very exciting, interesting company, and I'm looking forward to where we're going to continue to take this
It's a
amazing
great
entity.
company.
It
Yeah, I
is. It
mean,
really
the
is.
growth of the company is so impressive. It's just a great company.